Welcome. Thank you for joining us for this virtual event. This is the Shecession, Inequality, and COVID-19. We have a really great panel lined up for you all. This is all part of our Women's History Month celebration in the Office of Alumni Relations with our new Alumni Engagement Committee, which I will, send everyone some more information about in our thank you, where there'll be a brand new webpage with the committee, talking about what the committee has been charged with, and just anything if you'd like to reach out to any of us about, what we do. So I just wanted to quickly just go over a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If I can ask everyone to put themselves on mute during the presentation, just so that we can drown out any background noise and it's not distracting to other folks. There will be time for question and answer. This is supposed to be an interactive session. So during that time, we'll invite everyone to unmute themselves and, if you're comfortable with that, show yourself on the screen and to speak to the panelists and the moderator. If you do have anything that you want to talk about in between while the panel is going on, I invite you to write it in the chat box, and during the question and answer time, I will read that out. Sometimes, you might have a question that you don't want to forget. Please go ahead and put that in the chat box. So this is our first event for Women's History Month. We have another event at the end of the month, which I will also send you information about. It's part of our finance series, our ongoing monthly finance series. So I'll send you that. But to get started, I'll do a quick introduction of our panelists and the moderator, and then we'll turn it over to our moderator and begin the session. So for our panelists tonight, we have Maren Westphal, who is the class of 1980. She graduated from the Lubin School of Business and currently serves as the Senior VP of Tax and Global Chief Accounting Officer at Cigna. We have Maren Westphal, who is an associate professor of psychology at Pace University. Maren teaches on our Pleasantville campus, and she's a member of the Department of Psychology and Mental Health Counseling. And we also have, as part of the panelists, Riddhi Doshi. She is class of 2017. She's a graduate of the Lubin School of Business, and Riddhi currently serves as the Senior Associate within Crisis Management and Business Continuity at BDO, and BDO is one of the largest accounting firms in New York City. And then finally, to round out the panel, we have a current student, Hannah Wyllie, who is class of 2023. She is a student on the Pleasantville campus. Hannah is part of the Honors College and an athlete on the field hockey team. And then as part of for our moderator, we have Francine Pastore, who's class of 1983. Fran is a graduate of what is now called the Dyson College of Arts and Sciences and the School of Education. So this year, those two schools have merged. So some of you might not know that. Fran is the founder and CEO of the Women's Business Development Council. It is an organization that champions female entrepreneurship. And then I will step back and introduce myself. My name is Samantha Gordon. I am the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Pace. So you've probably gotten some emails from me, and you will continue to hear from me throughout. So Fran, I will turn the session over to you.
Thank you so much, Samantha, and welcome everyone. And many thanks to the Pace University Alumni Engagement Committee and Erica and Samantha and your teams for leading this initiative. I'm Fran Pastore, and I'm really proud to be here tonight and getting more engaged in the university's outreach to its alumni community, especially during these crazy times that we are facing. And welcome to my esteemed panelists. So March feels very different this year, and while we are all here tonight to acknowledge Women's History Month, we're also marking the 1-year anniversary of living with COVID-19. Which, as all of us on this panel have already discussed, is not only a healthcare crisis, but has spurred one of the worst economic crises in our nation's history. This economic crisis is also referred to by many as the Shecession. And a recent jobs report shows that 140,000 jobs that were lost in December, 100% of them lost by women. So tonight we're going to discuss how women across generations and socioeconomic backgrounds have been disproportionately impacted impacted by the pandemic. And our conversation is going to highlight what many of us already know is that this is not a gender issue, this is an economic issue. We know that because of the pandemic, women shoulder about 70% of the at-home childcare and the education of their children, while still juggling their job losses, especially the women that are in retail, hospitality, education, healthcare fields, the majority of whom are women of color. Others in the corporate sector, for example, have downshifted their careers or left the corporate world altogether. The combination of stress and financial insecurity are placing enormous burdens on both their physical and mental health. That said, there are some silver linings, and I myself have personally experienced those. Women leaving the workforce are starting businesses around the country and around the globe. And I've seen that right here at home with a 20% increase in the number of clients that we work with at the Women's Business Development Council. So let's let our panelists weigh in on this. We're going to start with Riddhi. Riddhi, in your role as a senior associate at BDO, you focus on resilience, integrity, and crisis management. In our prep meeting for tonight, you shared with me your passion to see more diversity, equity, and inclusion at the decision-making table, especially in times of crisis. Share with us tonight your thoughts around this topic as it relates to the pandemic today.
Thanks, Fran. So in my role in crisis management, I'm lucky enough to sit at the table where all the decisions are being made, especially during this COVID pandemic. And while it was really great to be there, I did find that a lot of those tables weren't very diverse, and they weren't necessarily inclusive. And I saw that impact the decision making that was being made there. For example, I noticed that a lot of the tables were just predominantly American people when there are operations in APAC. And I found myself being the person that asked, hey, you have offices in China. How is that being impacted? So I know that, firsthand, it's so important to have women at the table. And I'm really passionate about that. And then when it comes to the COVID pandemic, when I'm hearing that 1 in 4 women are considering leaving their current post, and I'm just starting off, I don't have children of my own, but there's ancillary effects. I don't see the women at the table. That affects how I see myself in a leadership position. So there's so many different impacts of COVID-19, and especially women, that I hope that everyone just appreciates the hard work that women are doing and makes the table a lot more inclusive.
Thank you so much, Riddhi. I think one of the things that you're bringing to the surface right now is that if she can see it, she can be it, right? We often hear that expression. And when decisions are being made around the table that impact women, and there aren't enough women and people of diverse backgrounds sitting at that table, what ends up happening is that our perspective or the perspective of the others is not shared. And then decisions get made. And I can think of one that really resonates with me going back pre-COVID, which was when Uber had no women on their board. And there were a lot of very unfortunate incidents of rape and abuse happening against passengers. Well, of course, who are the majority of the people that are using Uber? And who are the majority of the people that were not seated at the table? So your point is so well taken. I don't know if you have anything else that you'd like to add to that.
No, I think that's where it definitely starts. Getting the people at the table, making sure that the table listens to those voices and it encourages everyone to speak in an inclusive way.
Thank you so much. So Mary, we'll move on to you. In addition to your role as Senior Vice President of Tax and Global Accounting, you are also the executive sponsor of Cigna's Women's Leadership Council for Finance. And you shared some very progressive and impressive workplace changes that Cigna has implemented, some specifically targeted at women. In particular, you shared the 80-20 rule and how the company has implemented the 80-20 rule as a success strategy. Can you tell us more about what Cigna has done to help its employees overcome some of the challenges that they faced as a result of COVID? And I know that you're going to be focusing on how those challenges impacted women and how those innovative thoughts and ideas and workplace changes really were geared at women. Thank you.
Sure. I'd be happy to. And good evening, everyone. It's a delight to be here. So, you know, at Cigna, we are a healthcare company. So I think we tend to be a little bit more sensitive to people's personal needs. But, you know, COVID hit. It was probably March 13th when everyone was said that you would be working from home. And many of the women are either caregivers for elderly parents, they're mothers of small children, and there also are quite a few women who are single. You know, they could be in their 20s, they could be in their 50s, recently divorced, 60s or whatever. And it was very, very difficult transition for many of them. But as a result of working from home, especially during the first 2 months, you started to realize as you started engaging with people via Zoom or WebEx or whatever, people were dealing with a lot of distractions on a daily basis, et cetera. You know, you'd hear dogs barking, you'd hear kids crying, you'd hear all sorts of things. And so, you know, we finally sat back and a group of senior women, we got together and started sharing stories. We reached out and said, you know, we really need to do something about this. And what we said is, you know what, we can't be perfect anymore. We have to be good enough, right? Good enough is going to get us through this crisis. And if we keep trying to stretch things and expect people to be performing at the level that they were performing when they didn't have these distractions, I think we're kidding ourselves. So that gave rise or the birth to this 80-20 rule where, look, you know, just do the best you can. And if it's 80%, you know, a B+ is a really good grade, or a B is a really good grade. And if you can just get 80% of the work done, that's good enough for us. Now, there are areas where you do have to be perfect, you know. So for example, those of you who might be accountants or working for a public company, there are certain calculations at the end of a quarter. Well, it can't be good enough. I mean, you can't mess up your earnings per share calculation. You have to get that right. So in an attempt to sort of help and create a soft landing, we also created a buddy system where people could then have buddies. So, you know, if you were a person and you were responsible for this work, but yet you had kids that you had to be teaching, or you were a caregiver for an elderly parent, we put these people together with buddies so that they could work together and sort of share the work and help each other during periods where they may have been extremely stressed or their child became ill or something like that. And it really worked out well. It was very well received. But this was one of the things that we implemented at Cigna to help people get through these tough challenges. And we've continued this. We're still in the midst of dealing with this right now.
Mary, do you think that these implementations, these new work styles, the buddy system, the pods that you mentioned, do you foresee those lasting into the future, or is this something that you anticipate will get phased out? And I'm not just talking about Cigna. I think I have not heard of other companies who have gone to the lengths that Cigna has, and we actually talked about that. And what you said was a group of women in senior leadership positions. That in and of itself is not a common denominator in the private sector. But do you anticipate seeing these measures phased out? Do you think that companies in general that have implemented measures like this will keep them in place? Do you think that there might be a hybrid situation? I'm wondering also how these measures have been received by your employees.
Right. Well, first, what I'd like to do is just talk about a couple of more things. You know, because people are socially isolated, even if you have a family, you're still socially isolated. Work is a great place to gather, to socialize, where you have your friends. Particularly challenging for young single people who may not have a partner, you know, are looking to be out there dating. We bring interns into the company, you know, they're looking to mingle and they're not able to mingle. So we did things like we established a fun committee. So like, you know, once a month,
right.
we get together. we would get together and we had this thing called the Fun Committee where we would play like Thanksgiving bingo, or, you know, we do Trivial Pursuit for the 4th of July, and we did a cultural event, and we did recipes. I mean, there's just, we did a scavenger hunt, believe it or not, where everybody, and we had like 600 people on the phone, and we did a scavenger hunt, like you had to have an Amazon box, or, you know, bubble plastic, you know, things that you wouldn't, expired food, silly things like this. But the participation was overwhelmingly positive. You know, we also definitely spiked up the health and wellness in terms of EAP, Employee Assistance Program, for people so that they could do more and more virtual visits. You know, just struggling with the loneliness, the isolation, the depression. I think it's perfectly normal. So I just want to add that there are many, many more things that we tried to do. I think that these things are here to stay. And I think the reason being is that we've already done surveys, and we're not planning on having our workforce come back. Even when everyone's vaccinated, we achieve herd immunity or whatever, many people are opting to stay home and work 2 or 3 days a week. You know, or some people are opting to work 5 days a week. And so as a result, the communication is going to be more and more virtual. We're going to be interacting more and more virtually. And so in order to keep that sense of community, keep your teams engaged, which is so important, and create that sense of community, we expect to be continuing these things. The Fun Committee is continued. We have 40 new members this year, and we're going to definitely, we're already planning. I don't know what they've planned yet, but we had our first inaugural meeting for 2021, and we're going to be doing something in March. So yes, we expect these things to linger.
I love it. That's just fantastic, the Fun Committee. Can you talk a little bit more about the gender dynamics in terms of what you've incorporated, and you know, what the response has been, especially among the women at the firm?
Well, so in terms of these initiatives, or just generally speaking? Because
in terms of the initiative, well, generally speaking, and then how people might have responded to these initiatives.
Well, in terms of the initiatives, it's a very diverse group. I mean, believe it or not, I've got 40-year-old guys, I've got 50-year-old guys, people of all ages, genders, or whatever, participating in the Fun Committee and in these activities, because everyone realizes that it's so important to create positive engagement when you're working in this type of situation. So I would say that. I would also say that, so, you know, in the spring, you know, we saw some very serious issues. We saw some racial injustice occur, and, you know, that took heart, especially for a lot of the people living in cities like Philadelphia, St. Louis, et cetera, because we're pretty much a global company. And so as a result of that, the focus on diversity and inclusion, albeit it was there, but it's just ratcheted up exponentially as a result of that, realizing, gee, we really need to do more in our company. And we formed a council, a diversity and inclusion council. It's run by an African-American named Ed Lewis. He went to Columbia University, and he's in our investment group, and he's heading it up. We got much more involved with the Women's Finance Council in terms of dealing with the women coming up the ranks and trying to have cultural initiatives to support them, et cetera. We've partnered with HR, and we're really starting to get demographics, you know, for ethnic minorities, et cetera, and starting to think about implementing policies. Like, for example, if there's a job opening, we can't require people to hire a minority. We can't require that, because you have to maintain that meritocracy, right? You have to have the skills. But what you can do is you can say, you know what, when we interview for these jobs, we're interviewing 3 or 4 people. Well, on that slate, you need to have a minority candidate, a gender candidate, et cetera. And you also need to look at the organization and see where you might be able to pull up talent and give people stretch assignments so that they get that opportunity. So yes, we're very much involved in trying to do things like this to promote diversity and inclusion within our company.
Really remarkable and so impressive. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Hannah, we'll move on to you. You were recruited for field hockey. from England at Pace University. When we met, you talked about the stress of going home over the break, and not only on you, but your family and how that impacted your trip. We want to hear from you, your perspective about how this pandemic has affected you and your peers, especially as a foreign student living abroad away from home. We talked a little bit when we met about your roommates, your friends, and your hockey team members, and how this is impacting them. So talk a little bit about that with us.
Sure. So obviously we got sent home around March last year. That was a bit of added stress because I had to quickly adapt to online learning. I'd never used Zoom or any kind of online meetings before, and neither had any of my professors. And I obviously had to deal with the time difference. So I was 5 hours ahead. So I was staying up all night, doing all my work and everything. So that definitely impacted me a lot. And then over the summer, I had a massive long break where everything was shut. I couldn't get a job anywhere. I was just, waking up, wondering what to do with my life. And thankfully, because of my visa, I was lucky enough to come back, and I was expecting to have a field hockey season starting in August. But unfortunately, the week before I came back, it was cancelled. So I quarantined and then I came back, and everything is still very online, very restricted on campus. I live with 5 girls in a tiny room, so we only have 2 desks between us. So it's hard to take exams and find quiet time and find that space. There's also no social life on campus. So I work at Pace Pack Cafe. We can't have customers coming in to take their food. So it's become quite an unsocial kind of place, whereas before it was so sociable. We also had all of our gyms and our intramurals all shut down. So no one could meet new people in that way. And we have guest policies. We can't have anyone else in our rooms. So it has been very restricted for all students across the campus. And yeah, I think online learning has really affected a lot of people. I like the fact that I can, like this is being recorded, I can watch everything back and understand things better, but it's not the same as being in person. And I would usually commute into the city to take city classes, and I can't do that now. So yeah, it's really impacted a lot of students here on campus.
What have you done? It's so unfortunate when I think about what the cafe would be like, and it's bustling and everybody's talking and you're kind of just casually catching up with everyone. How have, you said you live with five young women. What are you doing as a group to kind of respond to the crisis in terms of your own socialization among your little pod, right? Or is there anything that you're doing that you would share with us?
Sure. So we actually all play field hockey. So it's nice that we can all go out and get a bit of release on the pitch when we get to train. But we've definitely been going off campus a lot more, even if that's just going for a walk. We've tended to go hiking quite a bit when field hockey's been cancelled, or go play in the snow, or we've tried to go skiing and things like that. So I guess it's been good in that way because we've tried new things that we would have never done, and we would have usually been so busy with our hockey schedules. We've had the opportunity to explore the area, which has been nice.
So one of the silver linings has been your exploration of Westchester County and the community around you, and it's just the 5 of you, it sounds like, or maybe a smaller group, but you're out and about and you're getting some fresh air and you're finding ways to cope.
Yeah, we have to try and stay as a bubble as much as possible to avoid COVID scares because of hockey. So yeah, it's been nice though.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great segue to Maren, Dr. Westphal. We can't ever forget the people who suffered and those who perished during this pandemic. But we have to remember that there is hope and there are some silver linings. I've personally seen in my work, women coming together to help one another, to share their knowledge, their wealth, their food, and to comfort one another. Dr. Westphal, in your remarkable work as a professional, with innumerable credentials in the mental health field, can you share with us the human capacity for resilience, the importance of self-care, and the role that mindfulness plays in providing us with a way to calm the mind and relax the soul during this pandemic?
Sure. Thank you, Fran. So in my research on resilience, basically what I found was that people are remarkably adaptable. They find they have many resources, internal and external, that they can recruit. But for women in particular, the resources that are perhaps the most important one in terms of promoting resilience in COVID-19 times are social connectedness. So that's both a good and a bad one. A good one in that sense that we are already wired to seek out others for regulating our emotions, for both giving support and receiving support. There's neurocircuitry that makes it so. And one of the responses to stress, for instance, that has been associated with better functioning is tend and befriend. So this refers to a way to respond to stress by tending. This could be offspring, this could be others that are close to you, but also seeking to befriend, so seeking out others to connect with. And so those are two things that are already shown to a greater extent in women than in men, broadly speaking. Those are overgeneralizations also. But in a pandemic like this, there are tremendous opportunities for people to connect with each other, even though there's the physical distancing. So that the term social distancing could be seen as a misnomer, right? It's about physical distance, but we can connect with each other. And just discovering Zoom, for instance, in my own life, I've now connected and done more Zoom conferences with family, with friends, and that I would otherwise not have gotten in contact with. But there's also another side to it, and that's becoming more aware of isolation as well. And so there has been a tremendous increase also, for instance, in alcoholism. So the desire to be on Zoom happy hours, it has also had its cost in terms of, I read about 41% increase according to a RAND Corporation study of heavy drinking in women over the course of the pandemic compared to before. So what's really important is, in terms of promoting resilient responses, is to be mindful about how to connect with others, and maybe more importantly, how to connect with oneself. So one of the constructs that I have been studying in my research, and that are also heavily drawn in my clinical work, is the construct of self-compassion, which essentially boils down to treating yourself as you would treat your friend, or as and so women are really good at caring for others, but they're remarkably bad often at being kind to themselves. And in the pandemic, where you may be isolated and you may just be with students in my courses and my friends and others that I've known, during the pandemic, it's really been very, very difficult to keep up with, other people talk about discovering new hobbies and baking bread, not so for a lot of women with small children, right? You don't have any minutes in your day. I remember getting bombarded by links from well-meaning friends to yet another social activity you could do with your child, or some educational thing. And so, like, if I can get her to do 20% of her homework, wonderful. I'll be 80-20 rule.
I think Anna Sophia is on this call with us right now. She must be so proud of you. Anna, welcome. I'm so glad that you're joining us. Say hi. Hi. And I can see she's adept at Zoom as well.
Yes. So going back to the notion of resilience, so this capacity to be nurturing, to be kind to oneself, is something that is really fundamental to, and has the same effect on reducing stress as the tend and befriend, as the seeking out and caring for others. That's the same neuropeptides are at work here, oxytocin. So one can develop this this capability, and so I try and do that with my clients. And mindfulness is one of the key components here, that you become aware of your own suffering, that things aren't going so great. And then the next piece of it is, okay, so beyond being aware of it and just acknowledging this is the reality, to seek a sense of common humanity, to see that you're not the only one in experiencing this way. And that's why I really like hearing Mary, this idea of having buddies, right, to develop these support systems at work, and the 80-20 rule of being kinder to in terms of your own expectations. So so seeing one's common humanity, that's the other piece of self-compassion, and then from this to have a kind attitude towards oneself. So as I said earlier, to try and talk to yourself and care for yourself the way that you would for a friend that you care about. And this is really not like, you know, fuzzy stuff, like nice Californian stuff. It's actually pretty heavily research-based these days, and there's a lot of evidence-based support now for instance, compassion-focused therapy. But really, there are simple practices that you can do to develop this capacity. But the key one is mindfulness. So without paying attention to something, you can't have compassion towards it. So just allowing yourself to notice what's going on physically, the emotions that you might be feeling, and allowing them in is the first step. And that is also not an easy skill to develop, but there is a lot of ways that you can actually practice it that people aren't aware of. So you don't have to meditate. You don't have to have a formal meditation practice, but you can practice mindfulness washing your hands, which is something we do a lot these days, or waiting in line is another thing we do a lot of these days, right? So where just the simple act of grounding yourself in the present moment by feeling the soles of your feet resting on the floor, or to focus on your breathing, are some of the steps, or in the case of hand washing, to just really pay attention to the physical sensations that you're having while you're washing your hands, are all ways of redirecting attention. That is really an essential skill, this ability to redirect attention away from wherever your mind has taken you before to the present moment that you have. So, so yeah, it's about a skill that can be learned, a practice that you can cultivate, and it can be as simple as doing your dishes mindfully, or washing your hands mindfully. Yeah, without taking up too much airtime here, these are some of the things I wanted to share.
No, you have more time. So give us a few more tips, because I know personally that it's so hard for me, and I would ask anybody who has guilt when they are being compassionate toward themselves or taking any self-time. I always have so much guilt personally. Anybody else have guilt when you're doing something for yourself? You feel like you should be doing it for someone else. It's really remarkable, and I think it's really very much related to gender. I know that even today I wasn't feeling 100%, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not doing enough. I didn't call her back. I didn't respond to that email. What do you recommend when those feelings start really creeping in of not being enough?
Right. So like I said earlier, the first thing is to even just stop. Like stop and become aware that this is what's going on. Because one of the problems with these thoughts is that they are quite insidious, right? You might not even notice you're having them. It just goes around and around and around. It's hard to shake it off. And so what the practice of mindfulness, and one of the most common ones to use, is to really find an anchor. And the anchor can be your breath, but the anchor can also be the feet on the floor. Usually a physical one works really well. And that works differently for different people. What is that physical anchor? But basically to see that your mind is falling, and then to make that conscious decision, because it's not like you can be in the state of mindfulness. You know, it's really a process. So the moment you have these thoughts, you can't just magically be mindful and poof, goes this thought. You know, it's more like, okay, here it goes again. Wow. And there are exercises that you can do, like imagining writing the thoughts on balloons, right? Those are clinical interventions. But basically, more simple way is, okay, I'm having this thought again. And just labeling, okay, there it goes. I'm having that thought again. And then each time you do that and actually like say, I'm having this thought again, yikes, I don't want to have it, go away. And of course that doesn't work. So it's just with like, okay, with an attitude of curiosity and openness, which is actually one of the attitudinal foundations of mindfulness from the point of view of those that are, you know, key leaders in the field. It's attending to the present moment, but with an attitude of non-judgmental and kind spirit. But yeah, it's just when I teach my patients mindfulness and also my students, I teach some of my students mindfulness too. I always prepare them before and say like, okay, it's inevitable. Your mind is going to go elsewhere, not just once, all the time, because that's just what thoughts do. So the practice of mindfulness is here, like noticing how your thoughts have gone, redirecting it by breathing, redirecting it by touch, physical touch, whichever form that works for you. And yeah, that's just what the mind does. It goes all over the place. And in terms of activating that compassionate stance towards yourself, this is where you, some of the things that help is to both engage in very deliberate practices that involve journaling, for instance. And I'm not talking about like long journal entries, but really sort of reflecting on your day, identifying what really didn't go so well, and then seeing how you were feeling when you weren't feeling well, and then identifying that common humanity, what it was about the circumstances that might have led to you behaving in a way that maybe you're not proud of, and then responding to these and finding a connection with what other people have gone through and putting it into context. So it would make sense that you would act this way because COVID-19 has deprived you of your normal way of dealing with stress, which happens to involve other people, for instance. And so, yeah, there's a ton of other strategies that can be used. But the fundamental practice that underlies everything is the practice of mindfulness.
I feel like we can talk about this topic all day, but I do have one question for you. You're in private practice, right? As well as your teaching at base?
I work at an institute called the Institute for Cognitive Therapy in New York City. And so it's not my own private practice. I have a boss. And yes, I see a limited caseload of patients, and that really keeps my feet on the ground. You know,
I was going to suggest that you may have a lot more patients after this call. So thank you so much, Dr. Westphal. So informative, and we definitely can be talking about this for another hour, I'm sure. So with that, I am going to encourage, I know that there are some questions in the chat and some feedback in the chat, but I'm going to turn it back over to Samantha to raise those questions and respond. But I want to encourage everyone, if you have specific questions for any of the panelists, please feel free to put them in the chat. Samantha?
Yeah, so there's one question in the chat here that I'll read out, or a couple questions actually. But if anybody wants to, chime in between, please do so. This is one that came in a little bit earlier when we were talking about it. So they're asking when it comes to, support, what about companies or employers with less resources and limited ability to launch initiatives aimed at engaging and supporting employees during this time? Is this where women are leaving the workforce because we're working in environments that aren't as supportive during this time? I'm not sure if this is one that the panelists can answer, but.
Well, I'll just step in here.
Yeah.
Look, in order to have a fund committee, I mean, that doesn't cost anything. There are activities that teams within your organization, whether you're 5 people, 10 people, 15 people, can do to encourage socialization, bring people together, and foster a sense of family or community for that organization. And this doesn't cost money. The fund committee doesn't cost money. We basically go up on Zoom and schedule it out. It's just a matter of taking the time to invest in coming up with these activities to keep the teams united and engage in a way virtually, because you can't go to a bar and have a drink, you can't go out to dinner or lunch. So that's what we're doing, and it doesn't cost anything. So I think there are a lot of things you can do that I don't think you have to be a big corporation. Now look, if you're going to provide EAP coverage for workers, if you're going to provide emergency time off and things like that, those things do require funds. But I do think that a fund committee, the 80-20 rule, buddy systems, creating that doesn't cost money. That just takes time and people working together and trying to create that environment.
Yeah, and I think if I could just add to that, it doesn't need to be an initiative, right? It could just be the one-to-one interaction that you have every day that changes the way people work. Just spotlighting, I've seen an example recently where the company just spotlighted a woman that, took risks in her career and failed a few times. And highlighting that, I think, is such an amazing thing, because, we were talking about not being enough, and, that always kind of in the back of our head sometimes. And highlighting that and making that the norm when we talk to others, I think will make a really big difference. And will foster that supportive environment that keeps women in the workforce.
All really good points. And Mary, you're absolutely right. It really doesn't cost that much. I work with a lot of really small businesses with less than 20 employees. I myself have 22 employees. We haven't seen each other or been together since March 15th. But what we've done is, as a leader in the organization, I have made sure that everyone has received a birthday gift, a small token, because during this crisis, we've been so busy helping businesses stay alive. So making sure that every team meeting, which we have tomorrow, which I'm going to suggest forming a fund committee, making sure that everyone has the resources that they need, making sure they have the right technology. If they're having an issue with their technology, it's being addressed, making sure that I touch base with each and every staff member individually every other month, in addition to our team meetings, but making sure that I'm reaching out to them. And then just little things like, for the holidays, making sure that every couple of months, we're sending something to their home to acknowledge something, whether they did something great, if it's a holiday, if this is Women's History Month, we're going to do something special for that. So I think your point is well taken. It's, some companies have the resources to do a lot of fabulous things and others don't, but it's the thoughtfulness piece and the connectivity piece.
So we have a question. Dominique, you raised your hand. I don't know if you want to unmute yourself and ask.
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Samantha. And thank you to the panel, and thank you to PACE for doing this. This is really terrific. I had a question for Mary. First of all, I think you're going to have a whole bunch of people who are going to be applying for jobs at Cigna after this, because it sounds terrific. I was particularly impressed with the buddy system concept. I really like that collaborative approach. I was wondering, was there any pushback or resentment from people, say you weren't in a position where you were going to avail yourself of this, kind of sharing? Maybe you didn't have family care issues or child care issues. And I was just wondering if there was any resentment.
You kind of froze, but you froze there, so I wasn't sure I got your whole question. No, I mean, there wasn't any resentment. I think that people, look, COVID's like, fortunately, it's like 9/11. I mean, I hate to say that, but we're all going through this tragic time, and so humanity kicks in, and people want to help people. Most people really do want to help people. Most people are not competitive, crazy, whatever. And I think that at times like this, it sort of flattens the world, right? Even the hierarchy is isolated and working from home. Like it flattens the organization. And so, people are like, gee, why wouldn't I help this person? And if some people were unable to be buddies, okay, fine. No harm, no foul. but where there are certain things and people needed a buddy, let's get you a buddy. And that's what we did. So, but there was no resentment. Nobody got evaluated from a performance point of view. Gee, if you didn't sign up to be a buddy, you got an X next to your name. It wasn't done that way. It was done in a spirit of kindness, empathy, and caring, so that we could just get through this tragedy together, and take care of ourselves. That really is what it was.
Do you think this is something that you'll continue into the future, that particular program? Because it sounds great.
Program. Yeah.
The buddy part.
Yes, I think that, so we sometimes buy companies, or we sometimes go through periods where the work it skyrockets versus other periods. And so getting a buddy system to help during that, because some people might be working on a particular project or et cetera. I definitely think that this is something that we'll keep. And what I also find is, believe it or not, people really enjoy helping other people. People really, people want to help other people. It's creating that environment of collaboration that makes a difference. It really, really does. And this has turned out to be very positive, and, we're not keeping score. We're just not keeping score.
Thank you.
I have another chat box question. How do you suggest women be actively mindful when it's hard for our minds to shut off? Women are charged with keeping the mental role of our families, even when the physical responsibilities are shared.
I guess this goes to me, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, completely right on. There are all these demands on women in particular. And so the one thing to remember, though, is that one doesn't exclude the other. And in fact, in taking care of ourselves, we're taking care of others. So it's the same, like you put on, when there's the advice that if you're on an airplane, you need to, first of all, ensure, air for yourself before you can tend to others. And it's the same way with self-care. So what you're doing is modeling to others. So for instance, in the case of with children, if you have children, you're not doing your children a favor if you're available constantly and hovering over them and wearing yourself out. In terms of the mindfulness here, is just to, first of all, see when you're rotating, right? And you're thinking, oh my God, I have to be this perfect parent. But even like catching yourself having that realization and what the mindfulness also, if you're practicing mindfulness regularly, what it can help is to create that space. And we're talking not about long formal meditation practices that are really impossible or impractical, but if you are training yourself to get into the habit of just pausing every once in a while, like breathing, pausing. What that creates is an opportunity not to react. And it's this vicious circle of feeling exhausted, feeling overwhelmed, having all these things to juggle, and then acting in ways towards your children or your significant others that then sap you of energy, because you then also having not just the stress, but also the judgment over how you reacted. And that then adds further stress to your life. So the first thing is to adopt that. I would not say even 80-20. I think it's more realistic to say 50 maybe, as far as household, as far as parenting is concerned, in terms of how your performance at home goes, because also that then carries over how you might be performing at work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And just realizing, like, for instance, going back again to joining with others and recognizing shared humanity and seeing what you have in common with others. I remember with my child's, we have this WhatsApp messaging service, and everybody contacts each other, and there are always these super parents that manage to investigate, and I would see all these messages popping up. Oh, where's the science experiment? Oh, where's this and that? And initially I would let it get to me and say like, oh my God, how do they do this? And, you know, I'm not doing well. And then I talked to the teacher and she said, hey, just do reading, writing, math. That's it. You know, everything else, not necessary. And that made such a fundamental difference. And then I actually put a message on the WhatsApp and said, hey, I'm not doing science experiments right here. I'm not doing this. Is anybody else out there? And then just the responses kept coming in. And it turned out that most of the parents too, you know, were struggling to keep it up. And it was just for voicing that and sharing with others that it just created the space to say like, okay, it's good not to be perfect. And actually it's perfectly fine. And it teaches you a lesson, that's the silver lining, teaches you a lesson more broadly about the attitude that might be helpful to take. But I'm not saying any of this to you know, to mean that this is easy and that mindfulness is this quick fix, because that would be, you know, not respectful and not appropriate. It's not a quick fix. It's just a practice of stopping, breathing, redirecting, starting again. That creates the space for dealing with the situation better.
And then it looks like someone else, Nicole, raised her hand.
Hi, so I just had a question, both of what Dr. Westphal just said and also what Mary has been talking about. And this idea of humanity keeps coming up, and this idea of either 80-20 or 50-50, maybe, whatever it might be. But I'm just curious if you think that women in particular, showing our humanity, showing our vulnerability, showing our, I can't juggle all these balls at once, will actually be a way for us to be more real and honest with each other and then support each other moving forward, whether that be in a family sense or an academic sense or a career sense, but kind of being honest with each other and not trying to hold up that perfection. If you think in the long run, that's going to actually put us ahead. And I'm not sure who that goes to. just kind of throwing it out there. Anyone's welcome to answer.
Well, I'll just say this. So, and I feel like I'm doing a commercial for Cigna, and I that's not my intent at all. It really isn't. I've worked at other organizations that I really didn't enjoy, but we actually started this whole thing by talking with psychiatrists or whatever, where we talk about how important it is as a leader to have empathy, how important it is to be vulnerable. And vulnerable is like, you know, I'm not having a good day today, or whatever. So I think, Nicole, more and more, and the fact that we've adopted this is because it's out there in the marketplace, that research is suggesting that companies that engage this way have a much more successful workforce, a much more productive workforce, and a much more collaborative workforce. So it's not like Cigna invented this. This is years and years of research. So I think you're absolutely onto something. I think that if you look at the research today, that's what a lot of people are saying, that hierarchical structure. I mean, look, I'm in my 60s. I mean, I grew up with that hierarchical structure. It's just not going to work. And it's certainly not going to work with millennials. And then, you know, women who want to pretend that, you know, like, look, I remember when, I hope this isn't off target, but I remember when I had my kids, you know, I used to crack a joke and say, oh, you know, they asked me, how is your son doing? He was 4. I said, oh, he's driving, you know, he's driving, he's this, he's that, you know, like there's so much of this insanity about having these super kids. It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And so part of it is you as a human being, you're a rational person. Let's be realistic. You know what you're capable of. You cannot run on all cylinders at 100% every single day. And I think that's what Dr. Westphal was saying. You can't. So, I mean, Dr. Westphal, you probably should weigh in here, but I just thought I'd share that as an organization that's recognized a lot of what you're saying, Nicole, that's the way the world is.
Yeah, really well spoken, Nicole, and definitely, I think what we already hearing here is basically connect with each other and shared humanity in action, right? And I'm finding myself share these personal examples from my own home and with friends, as well as my clinical work. And that is because this is an issue where connecting with others over our experience is a fundamental part of coping with the challenges of COVID-19. Without that, we're really left without what I started off with the coping mechanism that is fundamental, particularly to women, but I mean, it's a shared human, it's not unique to women by any stretch of time, but it is something that evolutionary speaking has contributed to us thriving and surviving. So share attending and befriending on a Zoom level, on a global level is really critical.
Wonderful. So we have, it looks like I have one last question in the chat box. And this is for, I guess, this could be really for anyone. You know, if Hannah, also feel free to share from the student perspective too. Do you have strategies to help women to improve with their loved ones? Are there online forums that help women find their voice? It'd be interesting to see if there's anything that, you know, student development has been doing on this as well, to talk to the students about this. But yeah, but that could be for anybody.
I can take it.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I recommend to my own daughters is has a lot to do with what we've all talked about already. In particular, Dr. Westphal is really connecting with community. And all you have to do right now is, I mean, there are Zooms every day in every topic that anybody can possibly imagine. Getting engaged in something that you're passionate about, whether it's ice hockey, whether it's the environment, if it's women's issues, whatever it is, there is so much out there that has so many communities that have been formed around issues of importance that have nothing to do with COVID, but about special interests. Someone's even told me that there is, you know, a group knitting consortium community online. So I think it's getting engaged. I had an interesting call with one of my clients this afternoon. Her business is called Comfort Zone with a K, K-O-M-F-O-R-T Zone. And we talked about, what she makes is, here in Connecticut are soaps and lotions. And prior to COVID, she was really struggling with her business. Since COVID, her business has increased by 186%. I'm sharing that with you because what's happened is people are online Googling exactly that, how to get out of their comfort zone, how to engage in communities that they haven't found. And we joked about it. And I asked her, what do you think the surge is about? And she said, well, I had to get out of my comfort zone. And I started connecting with women's groups and things that I was interested in. And immediately overnight, as a result of that, you know, an unanticipated outcome was that her business surged and she was really busy. But my point is that there is so much out there where we can each make a difference in an area, in a community that we care about, whether it's your local community or whether it's a more global community. And I would be happy to brainstorm with anybody participating on this call about how to find the right opportunity, because there's so much out there, including just getting engaged at Pace University.
And then Lynn, you wanted to make a quick comment?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what Fran was saying, is that, you know, when you're trying to be creative, I'm a teacher in a preschool, and we were trying to give our parents like simple things to do. So we started, and I got out of my comfort zone. I made YouTube videos, like very silly, like how to make slime, how to, which you can find all sorts of things, but when a 4-year-old has connected with their teacher, they want to see their teacher doing it. They don't want to look on a YouTube with someone who they don't know. And then I did a nature walk where I just found bugs around my yard. Like, it was so silly that actually helped the women feel like, oh, like I don't have to be that weird super parent who's, making volcanoes and doing all these weird, crazy experiments. I can go out in my yard and look, Mrs. Kukaj says I can pick up a stick and look what I found underneath the stick. So just trying to really keep it simple. And I think if anything, I'm hoping that sort of connection that we were trying to get parents to make with their children helped improve those relationships. And then that will hopefully snowball into a positive thing out of this. But yeah, so thank you so much for all the discussion. And yeah, I'm with Dominique. I'm going to go work for Cigna now. So sounds like a great organization.
So everyone, Fran just put her email in the chat box. So I encourage you to look in that chat box and grab that email if you'd like to connect. And there were some other people who also did put their LinkedIn information if anyone would want to connect and talk further on this topic. But before we wrap up, are there any last questions that anyone has? Or, looks like everyone.
I don't have a question, but I just want to say this. I think, look, it's not easy to be a working mother, and especially to be a working mother in this environment. I mean, you're on steroids right now. But I would just tell you this I was a single mother of two. You don't feel guilty. Don't feel guilty. You know, love your kids, but don't feel guilty. And this idea of a super mom, it's in the books. You know, Martha Stewart, everyone thinks they have to be Martha Stewart. It's in the books. You know, it's okay to put a hot dog on the table every now and then, or grilled cheese. But like, don't try to be, you don't have to live up to this expectation that society is creating. You know in your heart that you love your kids or whatever, and don't let the society's expectations make you feel unworthy or like you're not doing enough. That's all I'll tell you. As long as you love your kids, provide a good place for them, they're going to turn out just fine. I promise you. So that's my little word of wisdom. But
Mary, that's such great advice. Great advice.
Wonderful. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this discussion. It's been really enlightening. I hope that you've gained something out of it. I will be sending the video around of this, as well as if there's anything that you would like for me to share with this group. I know some of you had chimed in about things that were going on at your own organizations or anything like that. Please feel free to send that my way and I will share that. The hope is that we can have this information available on our website as well. So I'll share that with you. Yes, where we'll learn more about Alumni Engagement Committee. But,
hi, Samantha. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I just want to add a brief comment just to piggy you off. Mary, it was Mary that just made the comment in regards to super moms. I try not to be a super mom, but I'm a mother of 5. I have a husband, so my house is always going crazy. And just for the parents that are out there, for the students who are mothers, yeah, don't feel guilty, because right now my kids, they're really struggling just being online with Zoom. I had a honor roll. My son was honor roll prior to COVID, and now, I mean, he has failed everything. And I have to tell myself, like, this is not a reflection of you. There was nothing that you did wrong. You did everything that you could. It has nothing to do with you. And I think a lot of times as mothers, we struggle with that because, my husband, he'll come and say, well, did you check this? Did you check? I'm like, how much can I do? And then sometimes I do get in a rut, like, is he blaming me because, the kids are failing? And so sometimes we just, like you said, we just need to step back and take a deep breath and say, you know what, it's okay. We will we'll get through this, like, I speak to other parents at the bus stop and like, are you experiencing this? I'm like, yeah. So, just, tap yourself on the back for all those mothers out there who are doing the best that they can, because it is a rough time and we will get through this. And like Mary said, we just have to support each other, and it's okay to say, you know what, I need a break. I need a timeout. I just need maybe I need to go get a pedicure or a manicure, just time for yourself. Sometimes you need that little time away just to take a deep breath. So I just wanted to share that with the group. Thank you.
No, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. But yeah. Well, oh, sorry.
I just said thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And yes, please, I will be in touch with all this information for you, including the recording, and feel free to reach out to the Alumni Relations Office. We're here if you want to chat with us, or if you want to connect with anybody who's been on this call, we can help you connect with folks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Good
Bye-bye.
night.
Be
Good
safe.
night.
Thank you.